Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is July 31st, last day of July in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful Central Susquehanna Valley in the Great Keystone State. A beautiful day out there this morning, folks. Beautiful drive into Sunbury to go take my aqua therapy for my fibromyalgia. And I pushed myself a little bit today, a little bit harder. I've been doing it for 2 weeks now, so I'm going into my third week. I'm pushing it just a little bit harder. And I am feeling a little bit, but I'm not, my muscles aren't sore. I'm just a little bit achy, you know, as far as fatigued. And so that's, we're still working on trying to get my energy levels back up. However, I do feel better. I really, really do feel better from doing all this aqua therapy. So I appreciate all the thoughts and prayers of my friends and neighbors and anybody else out there that knows about my fibromyalgia. That's been praying for me. I do appreciate that greatly. You'll never know how much that I do appreciate that. A lot was happening with the health care. John McCain. I know I'm going to get in trouble with this, but I always separate out John McCain's military service and his Senate service. And there are folks that call him a hero, a military hero, because he was a POW over in Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam. There were some folks that were serving with him, some men that were serving with him that had some other things to say about John McCain, but so those things are sort of swept under the carpet. And I'm not here to discuss that particular part of his life. Then he got into politics, and he's been in the Senate going on, it'll be 36 years, I believe he's coming up on. And honestly, he's narcissistic. He's a warmonger. He likes to have the limelight. He likes to have that maverick label, you know, applied to him, even though he's nothing close to being a maverick. He is a partisan hack. He is a political hack. And I cannot stand the man's politics. Now, I don't know John McCain personally, so I can't say, well, I can't stand the man John McCain, but I cannot stand his politics whatsoever. I mean, they stink to high heaven to me. He voted to have the repeal bill come out of committee so it could have the full Senate vote, and then he was one of the deciding votes in voting down the repeal. And I'm going to show you, I have a montage here. And folks, again, I know there's going to be some people that want to take me to task on this, but John McCain's a hypocrite. And I have video proof, courtesy of cnsnews.com. I have a video I'm going to show you after we get into the show here, where he says on multiple occasions we need to repeal and replace. Now, I've never agreed with the replacement part, but I've always agreed with the repeal part of Obamacare. And he has continually called for a repeal. And now, when he's back in the Senate, and he's playing the maverick role again, the hero of the hour, where they bring the bill out for a full Senate vote, and then he's being hypocritical. And that goes to speak to his character. And folks' character does not change much over their lifetime, unless there's a dramatic change in their life. For me, October of 1982, when I became a Christian, was baptized into Christ. That was a dramatic change for me, and it changed a lot of my principles. A lot of the principles I had before really weren't principles. They were more vices than they were principles, and I was not a very principled person before I became a Christian. And that was a life change for me that actually propelled me into a different direction, and hopefully my character and my principles have come a long way since then. With John McCain, I know and I don't know this for a fact, just from reading stories, that being a POW can change a person. It can change a person. Now, if we're to believe that, which I do believe that, and if you believe some of the stories of the folks that are in Hanoi Hilton with John McCain that didn't think very highly of him, maybe his principles and his character haven't changed. And this is who he is. This is who he always was, even back in the service. And I just can't, I can believe it, but I'm so frustrated with guys like John McCain, who first off, he doesn't even know what the Constitution says. I mean, one of the few that actually knows what the Constitution possibly says is Ted Cruz, but even then, he gets some things wrong. And the Senate and Congress, or Congress as a whole, Senate and the House of Representatives, are supposed to be following the Constitution. And I'm not saying they need to follow it more than the President of the United States or the Supreme Court, you know, the judicial branch of government or the executive branch of government. But by gummy, they're the guardians of it, and they're the voice of the people. They represent the people by consent. They represent the people. And yet, what have they done? What has guys like John McCain done to represent the people? Too many times our stewards replace the will of the people and the Constitution. Because there's a lot of times, and we're in an era right now where there's a lot of opinions of the American people that they want the representatives to do such and such a thing that's actually contrary to the Constitution. And the Congress people, House or the Senate, need to stand up to the constituents and say, well, wait a minute, what does the Constitution say here? I know this is near and dear to your heart, this is a subject that's near and dear to your heart, but what does the Constitution actually say about that? And they need, if their constituents don't know, they need to be of such knowledge of the Constitution that they can readily tell their constituents, this is not constitutional. This is not within the scope of our enumerated powers. And so we can't do that. And they need to explain it that way. But we don't. We have a Congress that's full of constitutional imbeciles. They don't know. And it's willful. They are willful in their ignorance of the Constitution and their role in the Constitution. They're woefully ignorant. We're going to talk a little bit today about the Convention of the States. And there's some articles out there in International Business Times that, or I think it's, I'll have to look that up. Let me see here just real quick. And I can actually go over to this real quick. I just want to make sure I'm getting the right, it's ibtimes.com. International Business Time. Yeah, I thought I was right. International Business Time. And they put out some articles by this Josh Keefe, a couple of them I have here, that are just, I have to believe it's on purpose. It's on purpose, the lies, because the truth and the facts are out there. Scholar and Molly have found them for us. They're out there. They're knowable. They're searchable. They're applicable. And yet we have folks in the lamestream media that are still not getting the story right when it comes to the Convention of the States. I have folks in the Constitution Party that are not getting the story right. And not even some guys that are claiming to be, you know, Mr. Bradley, the vice presidential candidate for the Constitution Party in 2016. I listened to a couple of his speeches, and he is totally wrong. He is totally opposite of what the Founding Fathers said about Article 5, the Convention of the States. He's totally 180 degrees out. And I don't understand that. Again, it's searchable, knowable, and applicable when you look and find the truth. And folks, I'm telling you, these anti-freedom folks, and this is where you have to go. This left-right paradigm does not work. Because a lot of people put John McCain on center-right. And some people actually have him far-right, but at least they have him on center-right. But this vote here, not to repeal, when he said so many times that he did, where does that place him on the left-right paradigm? I don't know. I would have to say that particular vote has him far left to center. But the problem is too many people have gotten caught up in this left-right paradigm. Well, Hitler was definitely on the right of politics. And other people say Hitler was on the left of politics. and they make arguments and good cases for both. So there's a lot of people out there that are confused about it. And that's why I've left behind the left-right paradigm. Either these folks are for freedom or they're not. Either they're anti-freedom and their policies take away freedoms and liberties of whether we're Americans or Germans or whatever. Whoever you're talking about, Stalin, Mao, anybody. You got to look at their policies and see, does this restrict my freedoms or does it protect my freedoms? And I think once Americans get into the habit of thinking this way, I think a lot more things politically are going to become clearer to them. They're absolutely going to become clearer to them. And this is something that I'm really working on to try to get this paradigm changed, because it does not work. It does not inform the American people, and I'll stick with America, but it doesn't inform any body of people, any state, any society, any culture. It does not inform them when you start talking left-right. We need to get away from that. It has to be freedom and anti-freedom. What's going on in Venezuela, what Maduro wants to do, is definitely anti-freedom. And the people there know that. They know that. But we still have commentators and lamestream media here trying to still paint this left-right paradigm, because it's confusing to people. It really is confusing, and we need to simplify things. We need to sort of redneck it up a little bit so people can understand it. And I don't think it's a hard concept to quit the left-right and go freedom or anti-freedom and actually judge each thing that a politician does or a group of people, group of citizens wants to advocate. We need to make sure and look at it. Does it enhance our freedoms and protect them, or does it take away from our freedoms and restrict them? And that's, honestly, folks, that's an easier way to go. It really is. And if we have liberty by law, and we're supposed to in America, that means that even Congress has to follow the law, which is the Constitution of the United States. And they cannot go beyond that. They cannot, and this is another thing before we really get into the show here, and we talked about this last week with the Supreme Court in Madison versus Marbury. They gave themselves extra powers that were not in the Constitution. And a branch of government can't do that. They can't give themselves power. The only people that could give Congress or the legislature more power would be Congress. They could pass a law. And it's their right and it's their duty to actually govern things over the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is there to adjudicate cases to make sure that we're following constitutional law to the letter. Not what John Roberts thinks it should have said, or they should have put the severability clause in Obamacare, and they didn't, so I'm going to put it back in there for them. And this fine, it's a tax. It's not a fine. The $2,000 you have to pay the IRS, or before Donald Trump became president, was a tax penalty for not having insurance. And me and my wife talked about that. I said President Trump signed an executive order to tell the IRS that they cannot collect those taxes anymore. So if I don't have any insurance for the rest of this year, I'm not going to get fined $2,000 I can't afford to begin with to pay the IRS, which is actually a fine. It's a penalty. It's not tax. But because of Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, bowing to public pressure and political pressure, did those two things that really hosed the whole system up. If Justice Roberts would have followed the Constitution and not listened to public opinion, we would not have Obamacare today. Because the Democrats on purpose left out the severability clause. They weren't stupid. They wanted, it was either sink or swim with them. They wanted it all. They didn't want to go into any half measures. And because of that, which I think was foolish, but because of that, it should have been thrown out. It should have been thrown out. So we got to get rid of these old paradigms and get with the swing of things, because when our country was founded, they were talking about freedoms and liberties that the crown was actually taking away from them, that they weren't protecting and making sure that the people could exercise freely. The crown was actually taking away their liberties and freedoms, restricting them. And the colonists had enough of that. They wanted to live as free men. They wanted to live as free Englishmen. and have the same voice in Parliament as the mother country. But King George was having none of that. And so we got what we have today. They rebelled, put out the Declaration of Independence, and boom. The rest is history, as they say. All right, folks. Do you do the grunt work around the house? Do you fix the appliances or the power equipment or other things around the house? Are you the handyman? If you like what you hear on the show, go to one of my affiliate marketers, Sears Part Direct. Go to the danclementshow.com and click on the widget halfway down the page. You'll see it right when you open it up. And you can order your parts through there. You can go online to Sears Part Direct and you can order parts through there. And if you go to my web page and you order it, there's an offer code there that you can put in, and you'll get 10% off all your parts. 10%, folks. That's a big deal, especially if you spend, $50 to $100. $100, that's $10. I mean, $10 is $10. And you'll not only get the parts you need that'll fit the application you're using it for, but you'll get it in a timely manner so you can fix that and take that off the honey-do list and make your honey happy. So if you like what you hear on the show and you want to help support the show, please go over to danclementshow.com and click on the Sears Part Direct widget, and you'll find all the parts you'll need to fix everything you need to fix around the house, right? Oh, today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 1, verses 10 through 15. I thought this was a very good passage. Like I said, I don't hunt these passages up. I get them on a daily basis, and I open them up. If it looks like a good one, we'll use it. And there's been a lot of times that these passages have actually coincided with what I'm talking about today, and it blows my mind sometimes how close these things are. Solomon's here talking. He says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path." And folks, since we're talking about politicians and that, there are a lot of politicians that we should not be following, because this is almost to the T of what some of these politicians do in our country. This quote meal comes from Matthew Henry. Now, Matthew Henry, if you don't know who he is, he wrote a commentary on the Bible, and a fairly decent commentary too, if I might add. "When I cannot enjoy faith of assurance, I live by faith of adherence." Sometimes we struggle with our faith, folks. We really, really do. Sometimes some things happen in our lives, and we struggle with our faith of assurance. But the best thing we can do when we're struggling with that is make sure that we're still following the Bible. The faith of adherence. Make sure we're still following the Bible, because you know what? God's going to lead you through that. Whatever you're going through, God can lead you through it and bring you out better on the other side. Today's Bible lesson comes from Bill Jackson over gewatkins.net, and it's entitled "Pretending." Another good lesson that popped up on my radar about Christians pretending, and you can actually extrapolate that out to other people pretending. Like politicians pretending they got your best interest at heart when really they're using their own interest or the interest of lobbyists that are trying to persuade them to do something. Now, I'm not against citizens grouping together like the NRA. Citizens group like that and lobbying for protections of our Second Amendment rights. Okay? I'm not against that. What I am against is when you get these corporations or these unions that aren't really representing any individuals other than in their small sphere. They're not talking about a countrywide type thing. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with foreign countries lobbying our politicians for handouts, and that's what they mostly do, or considerations. And so And so too many times our politicians pretend to be doing our best, or doing things in our best interest, and we have Christians doing the same thing out there. There are a lot of denominational Christians, especially on the old telly, the television, that they're in it for the money. They are in it for the money. If you see their lifestyle, the houses they live in, the way they jet around and stuff like that, they're in it for the money. They're not in it for the individuals. They're not in it for the gospel. They're just not. And you know, like I said, I may get in trouble for saying that, but sorry. If the shoe fits, you're going to have to wear it. All right. Let's see here. Well, let's get down here. Since we're talking about McCain, we're going to do a little bit on McCain and the healthcare and everything. But then I really want to get into this convention of the states and finish up the show with that, because like I said, I got a couple good articles by this John Keefe, K-E-E-F-E, or Keefe or Keefe, I pronounce it Keefe, from International Business Time. And again, you know, I was reading down through the article Saturday when I was looking at this, and I'm like, gee whiz, this information, I mean, they're literally lying to the readers, and if the readers don't do the research themselves, which most people don't, they're just going to think they're being told the truth. And I just couldn't believe the lies down through. There's just like this. Washington Free Beacon is reporting that 1,332 counties will only have one health insurer on Obamacare exchange in 2018. And I'm telling you right now, Pennsylvania is one of them. Because I went and looked, and this, not only my county, my state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I went and looked, there was only one policy for me on the Obamacare health exchanges. That was it. And I'm supposed to have a choice. People got hoodwinked. And I think they got hoodwinked because they allowed themselves to be hoodwinked. I'm not going to let people off the hook when it comes to Obamacare. There's too many people out there that wanted this handout from the government, wanted to not have to care about their health insurance. And just like when all this was being promoted, well, now somebody doesn't have to worry about their health care. They can pursue their artistic talents, you know, whatever that might be. Because they couldn't do that before, because they had to hold down a job to have health insurance and pay for things around the family. And I'm thinking, you know, I know a lot of good artists out there. And a friend of mine, Bill, is a member of our congregation. He does a lot of illustrating. And he also has a job that actually he can use those talents in too. So he did it the smart way, and he still does a lot of... I was looking, look up the term geocache. And this was a true geocache that him and his wife found. And he said he whipped up a couple watercolors real quick and stuck it in the geocache, you know, for someone to find. I thought that was great, but you know, he has good talent. I just don't... The anti-freedom groups lie about these people. Well, now they'll have more time to explore their passion in the arts, whatever that passion might be. And that was one of the arguments that Nancy Pelosi was putting forward and some other Democrats were putting forward. And folks, that is straight out of the Communist Manifesto. You know, the Marx and Engels was arguing that the people needed more leisure time. They needed more leisure time. And if we just socialized everything, they'd have all the leisure time they wanted. The only thing they forgot to tell the folks and everybody else that likes socialism and communism, and they're both the same thing. One's just more extreme than the other. Yeah, they'd have a lot of time on their hands. Most of it was starving and try to scrape out a existence so they wouldn't starve to death. That was the leisure time, you know, of communism, Marxism. So this is staggering, and this is by Allie Meyer over at the Washington Free Beacon, published on the 29th. Next year, there will be 1,332 counties in the United States that will only have one health insurer operating on the Obamacare exchanges, according to recent data. And there's a link in the article there from the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services. The agency has been looking at health insurer announcements, compiling data to see which counties will have either one or no Obamacare insurers operating in 2018. Roughly a month ago, the agency projected that 1,300 counties would have only one insurer operating next year. The agency also previously reported that there were 49 counties left with no insurers operating next year, but recent data finds that the number has declined to 40 counties. The map currently shows, and all these things are in these links in this article, folks. The map currently shows that nationwide 40 counties are projected to have no insurers, meaning that Americans in those counties could be without coverage on the exchanges in 2018, the agency said. It's also projected that 1,332 counties, over 40% of the counties nationwide, could only have one insurer in 2018. Now tell me how the promises of Obamacare are working out for folks. 1,332 counties, 40% of the counties in the United States of America are only going to have one insurer next year. If we don't get rid of this turkey and let the free markets take over, let the free markets do what they do best. And folks, I was watching Stephen Molyneux. I like watching him on YouTube. He's a self-educated philosopher. And he pointed out a historical fact that I'd forgotten, that early in the 1900s, the doctors got together and created associations like the American Medical Association, things like that, because they wanted to restrict the amount of doctors that were getting into the field, because they felt that there was too many doctors and they couldn't make a good living if there's too many doctors competing. So they didn't want the competition. So through the AMA and other associations, they got the government to put licensing up where they had to get these degrees and get licensed and all this stuff, which restricted how many doctors there would be. So if there's less doctors, there's going to be more demand for their services, so they could charge more, they could make more money. And it's one of those things where competition, if the government would have said, look, we are constitutionally bound not to get involved in this. You guys got to work this out yourselves. We cannot pass laws for licensing and stuff like that, even with the Commerce Clause. We cannot pass laws of that because that's not what the Commerce Clause is for. And competition would have weeded out the bad ones, and the good ones would have stayed, and the good ones would have made a good living. Maybe not as much as they do today. I mean, there's some doctors out there that make some extravagant living, but they're specialists. And they specialize in certain things, and they demand a higher price. But if there wasn't these associations around doing all this restricting, would there be more people in these specialized fields? Would there be more doctors out there? I don't know. You don't see the restrictions on lawyers. I mean, anybody can become a lawyer. You know, go to school, get your degree, pass the bar in the state you want, and voila, you're a lawyer. You're a practicing lawyer in that state. There's no restrictions on the competition for lawyers. Why is there restrictions on the competition in doctors? As a matter of fact, you can trace this back, folks going to the government to restrict competition. The furthest back I saw, and like I said, I'm not a full-time researcher. I do a lot of research, but I don't have the time to do it every minute, you know, of a work day. It was the oleo was invented back in the late 1800s, like the late 1880s, early 1890s was invented, and oleo is margarine. We call it margarine today, and it's not a dairy product. It's derived from oils, and basically it was cheaper and easier to make. It actually stayed longer. You know, it survived longer without refrigeration, and you know, which real butter doesn't. It goes bad. It gets rancid. And so the dairy farmers at the time in America got together to Congress to try to get Congress to stifle the competition of the oleo makers, because they said it would hurt their bottom line. And that's the earliest example I can find. And the dairy farmers were successful. And it's no different. You know, we've been talking a lot about net neutrality. Back in 1995, I was driving truck, and I developed diabetes real bad. When they found out that I was diabetic, I was right at 740 or 750 on your sugar level on a blood meter. I was ready to go comatose from sugar. So I took a year off. I had to take a year off to get that down to where, you know, I could just take some pills and exercise and diet and everything. And then I got my health card back for driving truck. But in that year, I was swinging cable. We call swinging cable for the local Service Electric Cable Company. and we were rebuilding. I was working on crews that they were putting fiber optic cable up on the poles, so we had to put all brand new lines going from the poles into the house, and that's what we were doing, or to the house, not into the house, and rehooking up, disconnecting, putting a new box on, doing all this work to rebuild these systems out there. And at the time, there was, I think it was Verizon in this area, but the telephone companies also wanted to run fiber optic and offer their customers service too. And in this area, in the different counties that they worked on, Service Electric Cable was able to stifle that competition to get a reprieve. And they weren't the only ones. There's a lot of cable companies around America that were going to the government and the local government, state governments, to stop these big telecom companies from laying this fiber optic and challenging them, being competitors to them. And it just amazed me, as I'm looking back now, how these cable companies colluded to stifle competition using the government. Again, you can probably find a lot more examples than I'm giving you for this. Same way with healthcare. This was the big lie that was told about, nationalized and socialized healthcare. And I'm producing a video. It's going to shock some folks. I don't do it for the shock value, but I'm using a recent example of how government-run healthcare kills people. And hopefully I'm going to get that video up today or tomorrow. And it does. It literally does. But people don't see that. People don't see that. They don't want to see it. They don't want to see the tragedies that come along with these type of decisions. Now, I got to get to this video. McCain repeatedly calls for Obamacare repeal. We know what happened. If you follow the news, if you're political like me, political junkie like me, you know what happened over the weekend. Friday anyway. And it amazes me. So let me get this. Let me get the fair use back up here. Let me get this set up, and I'll play it here in just a second.
The best thing government could do to ensure more Americans have access to health care insurance is to institute reforms that would rein in costs and make health care more affordable for more Americans. Regrettably, there's nothing in this legislation that effectively addresses the problem of health care hyperinflation. In fact, experts tell us the Democrat legislation makes matters worse.
It is also the first time that on a pure partisan basis, a major piece of legislation has been passed, and it's going to be historic because it's going to be repealed and replaced, and it's going to be done soon.
We need to reform and repeal and replace Obamacare.
How is it, I've been in Washington a long time, you've been in Washington a long time, that a freshman senator, less than a year in office, Ted Cruz, was able to lead your party into what some in your party are calling a box canyon here? How did this happen?
I think the very extreme dissatisfaction that many people feel. There was already fertile ground because of those many members of the House who were elected in 2010 on the promise that they would repeal and replace Obamacare. And by the way, there are many of us who fought it back to 2009. We still want it changed.
Over the last several years, Arizonans have been rightly frustrated with a wasteful, incompetent federal government bent on expanding its reach and power, from Obamacare to excessive financial and environmental regulation. I've fought against those excesses and have the scars to prove it. And I'll keep fighting. Quitting is not in my nature.
We need to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and we need to replace it, because health care in America is still not satisfactory, nor have we fulfilled the needs and our obligations that we have to all of our citizens. My constituents in Arizona call and write me daily, begging and pleading that something be done to alleviate the financial hardship of Obamacare. Thomas from Flagstaff wrote me his monthly premiums jumped from $200 a month to $600 a month. Jim, a resident of Arizona for 25 years, will soon pay an additional $160 per week. It goes on and on and on. Stories like these are unacceptable. While the President and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle continue to describe Obamacare as a success, families, patients, doctors, and small businesses across America continue to suffer from the disastrous effects of the President's failed health care law. Today, I am proud to once again stand with my Republican colleagues as we continue the fight to repeal and replace Obamacare. For these reasons, a majority of Americans today oppose the President's failed health care law. And they're counting on us, their elected representatives in Congress, to fight to repeal and replace it. That's why I was proud to partner with my Republican colleagues in sending the first Obamacare repeal to the President's desk. And the fact is that I stood on this floor until Christmas Eve morning fighting against Obamacare when it was rammed on strictly partisan basis. 60 votes they had, 60 votes they used. For the first time in history, we had a major entitlement reform that was done on a totally partisan basis, and we said at the time that it would fail. It's unraveling as we speak.
But to somehow now call upon Republicans to work with you to fix this disaster after, on the floor of the United States Senate, you did not allow a single amendment, not a single amendment, by the Republicans were allowed. It's the first time an entitlement program has ever been enacted without on a strictly partisan basis. You had your 60 votes, you rammed the 60 votes and the Affordable Care Act down our throats. And so now that it's been an abysmal failure, you want us to come and help you bail it out. We want to replace it. We don't want to fix it. We want to replace it because it's been a complete failure.
Mr. Peters.
No. Now, folks, that was a montage of John McCain speaking against Obamacare, and yet he fails to vote to repeal Obamacare. And the reason why, the news is reporting this, the reason why there wasn't any Democrat participation in this, in the replacement bill. And I'm thinking, now, he was against them ramming it through with just Democrats over Republicans. Now, there's a principle there, and I think he's holding to that. I'm not gonna argue about that at all. But when it comes to just straight out repealing it, he's a hypocrite. He's an absolute hypocrite. Whether it was along party lines or not, matter of fact, from my count, and I didn't find this article, but it was on One American News Network, there was a couple Democrats that were voting for repeal. Now, folks, again, this should never have taken place to begin with. If you want to place, and there's been a lot of unconstitutional things done by government, all three branches of the federal government. But in my lifetime, one of the worst violators of constitutional authority has been the Obama administration. Hands down. And folks, it amazes me when I talk to my fellow citizens, you know, my fellow Americans. When I talk to them, they're woefully ignorant about this. They really, really are. And it does amaze me, because you know what? I think sometimes, like I was talking last week, people check out. They don't want to educate themselves anymore. They don't want to be informed about a couple of the major factors in our country, like economics and politics, that control so much of our lives. That maybe not control, but has such a big influence on our lives, and they check out. They don't want to educate themselves on that. Now, I'm happy to say, because I do watch, YouTube's become sort of my TV now. There's a lot of funny things on there, too much vulgar stuff on YouTube, and so I try not to watch that at all. But there is some hope. there are some young millennials out there that are doing a good job getting the truth out and explaining things in a manner people can understand and are on the right side of things. There's some really good young millennials out there, and I'm glad to see them start to pop up on YouTube and the blogosphere. And it's just amazing. It does amaze me still that there are some young people that really get it, that really get it. And I'm pleasantly amazed, you know, because in our partisan, lying, unfact-filled narrative that the lamestream media and the anti-freedom groups put out, it amazes me that any truth gets out. But that's why I call them the lamestream media. They're just lame in their presentation of the facts, because usually there isn't any. And the new Main Street media are the ones that are actually getting the stories out and getting the facts out. And they, like Tim Pool, you know, he says he's more of a sort of liberal or libertarian. And like, again, I want these guys to get away from that, you know, left-right paradigm. You know, if they support individual freedom and liberties, they need to come out and say that, and say that they're against people that oppose that. You know, they need to start calling it freedom or anti-freedom or whatever they want, but get away from that left-right paradigm. This one here is from my friends, real quick. My friends over Let America Vote, a George Soros-supported group that is heavy on Twitter and Facebook. And there's a new report out here that exposes thousands of illegal votes in the 2016 election. And let me get over here. This is by Hans von Spakovsky over at the Daily Signal. He put this out on the 28th of July of this year. He said, a new bombshell study released by the Government Accountability Institute shows why President Donald Trump's Advisory Commission on Elections Integrity has such an important job ahead of it. The Institute concluded in its report that thousands of votes in 2016 election were illegal duplicate votes from people who registered and voted in more than one state. We were told this doesn't go on. We were told that there's no such thing as voter fraud. Oh, no. There's no evidence of voter fraud. And I kept asking these folks, because people say we can't prove a negative. So instead of asking them to prove that there is none, I asked them to guarantee me there isn't any. You know, you're saying, you're making a statement there's no voter fraud. Can you guarantee me there's no voter fraud? Can you guarantee that? The Government Accountability Institute, founded by Peter Schweitzer, author of Clinton Cash, seeks to investigate and expose crony capitalism, misuse of taxpayer monies, and other governmental corruption and malfeasance. Over the last few months, the Institute sought to obtain public voter information from every state in order to search for duplicate votes. This is the same type of information the President's Election Integrity Commission has requested. With this report, we may have a clue as to why some states are resisting providing this data. The Government Accountability Institute was able to obtain voter registration and voter history data from more than 21 states because while some states shared it freely, others imposed exorbitant costs or refused to comply with the voter information request. The 21 states represent about 17% of all the possible state-to-state comparison combinations. The Institute compared the list using an extremely conservative matching approach that sought only to identify two votes cast in the same legal name. It found that 8,471 votes in 2016 were highly likely duplicates. Extrapolating this to all 50 states would likely produce, with high confidence, around 45,000 duplicate votes. The Institute obtained this level of confidence by matching not only the names and birthdays, which can be the same for different individuals, but also by contracting with the companies such as Virtual DBS that have commercial databases to further cross-check these individuals using their social security numbers and other information. According to the Government Accountability Institute's experts, the probability of correctly matching two records with the same name, birth date, social security numbers is close to 100%. In fact, using these match points will result in virtually zero false positives. So we're talking, if they extrapolate that out and use a little math, we're talking about 45,000. We're talking about just duplicated, where someone was registered in two states and they voted in both states. Duplicated, folks. No, Let America Vote says there is no voter fraud. Read my nose. No new voter frauds out there. That's a bad George H.W. Bush impression. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Wouldn't be prudent to look into the voting records of the American people to see if there's fraud going on here. Wouldn't be prudent. Not going to do it. That's a little bit better. I can do better when I'm not so fatigued. But I just wanted to point this out to my friends over at the George Soros-supported Let America Vote, Indivisible Group, and Common Cause. All these are pushing against this narrative that there is voter fraud out there. And they can't guarantee that there isn't any. So what do? They spread lies about it. They spread lies about what the information they want to get. Some of these states, honestly, most of this stuff is supposed to be public, in the public domain. So I don't see where the states get away with charging people exorbitant prices or refusing to share the voter rolls altogether. I don't understand that part of it. And I think if you're in a state that hasn't done that, you maybe need to get with your representative, senator of your state and start pushing for this, saying the state needs to release this stuff. You know, and basically, I'm going to use the left's argument against them. What are you hiding? If you have nothing to hide, get it out there. It's supposed to be in the public domain to begin with. I had to put that one in there for my friends over at Let America Vote, the anti-freedom folks over there at Let America Vote and Common Cause and Indivisible groups over there. All right, I do have one more. I don't want to get into it. I'm going to save this one for tomorrow, but I'm just going to tease you with it. Why the Left Protects Islam. Very good article by Ben Shapiro over at Town Hall. Town Hall's carrying this. Of course, Ben Shapiro has a website called the Daily Wire. It's probably over there also. Now, I stumbled across these because I was reading a Common Cause on Facebook. I was reading their blurb about being against the Convention of the States, which anti-freedom groups would be against this. Because anti-freedom groups, and we'll get into this a little bit tomorrow, you know, when I go over this, why the left protects Islam. Anti-freedom groups are for government and against people. They'd rather have the power in the government inside these brainy-headed, you know, elites in ivory towers that think they know better than anybody else how to live somebody else's life. They'd rather have the power concentrated in there instead of where it rightly belongs, in the hands of the people, the sovereign people. Okay, and don't confuse that with that sovereign whatever groups out there. You know, the sovereign individual groups out there. The Founding Fathers had a whole different idea what sovereign individuals were. And we're sovereign as a group. And technically we're sovereign as individuals, but our sovereignty works best as a group. But anyway, I don't want to get into that too much. There was two articles here by this Josh Keefe. The Koch brothers want a new constitution. They are closer than you think. And then the other one's Inside ALEC and the corporate push for constitutional convention. Now, again, nowhere in your research will you find these groups that are pushing for a convention of the states use the term, except maybe in rebuttal, use the term constitutional convention. It is always phrased as convention of the states. They're not trying to call a constitutional convention. We've talked about this on the show in the past ad nauseum. They're talking about an Article 5 Convention of the States, which is not a con or constitutional convention. It is a convention of the states to propose amendments to the federal government. What are some of those amendments? Some of those amendments are the balanced budget amendment, which I think that's wrong-headed, and like a lot of other people think it's wrong-headed, but it's there. You have other ones, term limits on Congress and the federal bench. And some of them actually, they don't extend it to the federal bench, but it is to the Supreme Court. Definitely on the Supreme Court. They want term limits on the Supreme Court. They want term limits on Congress. Now, do you think Congress is going to propose an amendment to the Constitution to limit their time in Washington? I don't think so. And if you think that they are, then I've got some beachfront property back here behind in the sticks behind my house back here I'd like to talk to you about, okay? They're not going to do it. Now, let me go over this article here real quick. Now, ALAC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, and like I said, this is by Josh O'Keefe from internationalbusinesstimes.com. It had its 44th annual conference. Oh, excuse me. It was written on the 27th of July. Okay, had its 44th annual conference in Denver last week, and just as she's done since 2013, Wisconsin Democratic State Representative Chris Taylor, one of only a handful of Democrat lawmakers among the conference's 1,600 attendees, was there to get a sneak peek at the legislation that will cross her desk next year. Now, one of a handful. It's not that the American Legislative Exchange Council, who works with the states now, they don't work on the federal level, they work with legislatures across the states. There's a reason why Democrats don't attend this. Now, this is my research that I've been doing, over the years of Democrats and how they think with big government and everything. They don't like it when states get together and put forth legislation that may derail their big government legislation. So they're not going to be a part of this. They're not going to be a part of the American Legislative Exchange Council. Only a few of them go. And knowing a lot of these Democrats, especially up in Wisconsin, they are going to be very biased, and they're not going to tell you the full truth about it, about everything that's going on there. Now, ALEC describes itself as America's largest nonpartisan voluntary membership organization to state legislatures, connecting state lawmakers with experts to discuss business and economic issues facing the states. But to its critics, ALEC represents a dangerous corporate influence on public policy and a way for corporate America to write and disseminate laws. Now, already right there, you're already seeing where they're going with this. They don't like corporate America. They don't like anything about it, and so they're going to talk this down. They're going to twist the truth any way you can. Now, part of, and I'm not going to get all the way into this article here, but part of what they consider corporate America are these conservative think tanks, like Heritage, the Heritage Foundation, and others like them. These huge think tanks, Cato Institute. And just it goes on down the line. A lot of these think tanks, yes, do they get contributions from corporations? Yes, but they also get a lot of contributions from individuals like you and me who want to be part of them. In the past, I used to support the Heritage Foundation. I still use a lot of their resources because they do a good job of researching everything, and they don't tend to bias one way or the other. They just try to find the facts and put them out. But this goes against Democrats. Democrats don't like facts and truth, because if facts and truth got out, they'd lose their control. You gotta remember that. They'll lose their control, and that's why there's very few that go to these things. And this is why the guys like this Josh O'Keefe get the whole article wrong about the Convention of the States, about ALEC, about corporate influence. They're still worried about the Koch brothers. Wants a new constitution. That's a scare tactic. That's a scare headline. And I was perusing over that article. The links in this article here will be on the show notes page at the danclementshow.com right after the show. But it amazes me, again, how many Americans will not do the research on this article, will not go over to the Convention of the States and see what's going on. They won't go over, and matter of fact, they won't even talk if one of their representatives on the state level went to this. It doesn't even seem, I couldn't find anything where they actually went and talked to the representative about what was going on at ALEC. And I don't have it in yet, but I'm going to email, I'll make a note. I'm trying to remember things so I don't have to use paper too much. I'm going to email my state representative here in Northumberland County and ask her if she attended this or if she knows anybody that attended this. I'd love to interview them and find out what was going on there. But since there's some corporate money some corporate money. All these think tanks do not get all their money from these corporations. Like I said, a lot of them, they get endowments from other institutes, just like George Soros's Open Society gives these endowments to, or these monies to these groups like Let America Vote and Common Cause. There are, and the Koch brothers has a society like that also that deals with conservative causes or freedom causes. Not everything that the Koch brothers wants is freedom, but they're definitely, just because they're the Koch brothers, they're evil. But when you talk to them about George Soros and say, well, wait a minute, and here we go, what aboutism? What about George Soros out there? We have a history of both of them. Which one, honestly, which one would you rather trust? Would you rather trust a couple of American-born, I'm not saying anything against anybody that becomes a nationalized citizen, but George Soros has a very, very shady past. Matter of fact, he was part of the German army during World War II. And some of the research that I've done is pretty scary. And I don't know why he's walking around free in America. You know, if some of the things that reported about him during World War II were actually true. I don't know how he's walking around free other than he's got a lot of money to keep himself free. But I've said, I was called on the carpet on social media not too long ago. I'd rather trust Putin than I would George Soros. My friends and my leftist friends, or my anti-freedom friends in Facebook, they went ballistic. Oh, I can't believe you said that. George Soros is an American and you'd rather trust Putin over an American? And I said, you better go check that American's past and why he does what he does, why he supports all these anti-freedom groups like Common Cause and Let America Vote. Why he supports all those, and why these folks are against the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers, K-O-C-H. Why they're against them. Or Koch brothers, I guess they're pronounced. I just popped them at the Koch brothers. That are conservatives. More of their agenda is protecting folks' freedoms, and they're conservatives that way. So again, and like I said, there's a couple good articles in here, and I just want to say, as you read through, if you read through these articles, go over first and read. If you don't know anything about the Convention of the States, go to the Convention of the States project, or just put in Convention of the States, and it'll take you right to their site, and read up what they're doing, their philosophy behind what they're doing. Go read the Article 5 in the Constitution, and go read the debates around putting Article 5 in the Constitution, and then go read articles like this from this Josh O'Keefe that is very, very anti-freedom, because it's lying. It lies about everything that he's talking about there. And the other one is, like I said, the Koch brothers want a new constitution, and that's not the case. And that's the battle cry of the left, okay? And like I said, there's other articles I have in there. Article 5, Convention Advocates admit one downside to the plan. This is by Paul Bremer over at WND. And then I have a last one. It's Constitutional by James Stouter over at EmporiaGazette.com. So, folks, go over and do some research and read those articles, please. I beg you to go read those. Well, you hear the music in the background. That's the end of the show. But fear not, I'll be back with you tomorrow at noon with more fun and enjoying facts about politics. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.
Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.